Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 2 of season 2 of Legends of Tomorrow called The Justice Society of America. And I really did enjoy this episode a lot. It's quite possibly the most comic booky thing um, since the giant robot fight last season that we've seen in the Arrowverse. The Justice Society, of course, was in the comics sort of the predecessor to the Justice League. And here we get to see an interesting take on them that works pretty well. And there's also quite a lot of stuff going on with everybody. So let's just kind of get right into it. Now, characters like Stargirl is traditionally a modern character, not a World War II character. But that's a little detail that can be forgiven, particularly since Stargirl is one of Jeff Johns' creations. Um, and of course, Jeff Johns is sort of the big head honcho behind all things DC Entertainment these days. Now, the DC Comics Bombshell series, which is sort of alternate universe series that basically features a lot of the female heroes in World War II, Stargirl is actually there. And despite its sort of rather kitschy origins and some sort of World War II pinup style artwork, Bombshells is actually a pretty good series. I've read the first two collections recently, and it's quite a lot of fun. And of course, it's really hard to not love those sort of very retro character designs that have an immense amount of charm to them. My only real complaint about the Justice Society is, besides Commander Steel and Vixen and a little bit Hourman, we don't really get a very solid read on like literally half the team. I think Obsidian had maybe one line the entire episode. If you're not familiar with the character, it could completely go over your head that Dr. Midnight is in fact supposed to be blind. And Stargirl had a few lines, but nothing that really made her stand out as a character. I mean, it's a really nice costume. A little questionable whether or not she'd be going around showing. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's that. I don't know. Yeah, I suppose that costume is the sort of thing that would potentially work in the 1940s. But I do have to say, the whole. I mean, this is a time travel show. Of course, time travel shows inevitably get confusing. The whole thing that with what happened with Hourman, I have to admit I was sort of scratching my head a little bit there, going like, wait, so if this happened, then how did that? It's just one of those things that you just kind of have to go with. Although I did like that they took the time to explain a little bit more clearly what happened immediately after the events of the last episode. Because you see, like a lot of people, I always assumed that at some point the Justice Society was a group from the future timeline, and then that from them would eventually come the Justice League. Them coming from the past makes a lot of sense, is in keeping with the comics, and this is another episode that just gives us another reason to just sit there and go, God, Eobard Thawne is such a horrible, horrible person. I mean, this is the second time we've seen him kill somebody who's, well, he killed Cisco in one timeline, and he was destined, of course, to become Vibe. Here we see somebody who's an established superhero, and, Reverse Flash kills him. I still really want to know why in the world he's working with the Nazis, but I guess we'll see what's going on there. Now, the guy that he gives the super serum to and turns into that kind of Hulk type critter, that's a guy who in the comics is called, I kid you not, Captain Nazi, which is just, there's just something so ridiculous about it. Just something so kitschy about it that I can't help but be amused by it. And traditionally, Captain Nazi is actually a Shazam, aka Captain Marvel villain. Yeah, I mean, just the name alone, it's sort of like, man, whoever came up with this probably didn't even spend 2 minutes thinking about it. But, things were different back then. So you just kind of have to roll with these sort of things. The CGI wasn't exactly King Shark, now was it? But TV budget, right? And that didn't stop. I have a feeling that a lot of the money was for this episode was blown on that big fight between the teams at the very beginning, which was really cool. And I like how the whole thing of the episode is the Justice Society is this well-oiled machine of people who work together well. Everybody knows each other well. They can basically understand each other's thoughts extremely well, while the legends are just like these Keystone Cop gaggle of just complete misfits who bungle just about everything they touch. And you can tell that Justice Society does not have a terribly high opinion of that. They flat out say so, of course. I particularly liked how, even when she was trying to be nice about it, Vixen still kind of came off as a little bit condescending to Ray. Although she did even have that sort of moment where Ray said, like, well, hey, without that amulet, you're like what, like a second degree, like a fifth degree black belt and a bunch of other stuff, showing that yeah, Mari's grandmother is seriously badass even without the magic amulet. So cool on that. The relationship between the professor and his grandfather, that was pretty well done. I mean, obviously talking to, like, having one of your own grandchildren from the future pop up and start talking about you, even though kind of mentioning, like, yeah, I never knew you because, you were dead before I was born. Well, that's, obviously going to throw somebody for a loop. And, yeah, Commander Steele felt a little bit cliche, but ultimately it kind of worked out in the end. And I did like how they did end up bonding for the other things. And him being a hemophiliac, I don't remember that from the comics. I don't think that was the case there, but I thought it was a nice twist. Um, and then I'm not really sure why a guy with a big background in like engineering and physics like Ray was able to do stuff that would obviously involve like biochemistry and medicine and whatnot. But yeah, this is obviously going to be the way they're going to turn Haywood into Citizen Steel, which you can see how that's going to play out a little bit if you watch the preview after the end of the episode. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see what else. Definitely enjoyed the whole stuff going on at the nightclub. Victor Garber, of course, is a very well-respected Broadway actor. Here, he gets to go up there and sing and strut his stuff, and does a really great job. Breaks out a song from The Sound of Music, and is just sort of watching this guy who is playing a Jewish character played by an actor who in real life is gay, singing a song that makes makes these hardcore Nazis cry. That's man, that's just, and then he even throws in a nod to Back to the Future in there. That was awesome. And then there was that whole bit with like Ray just completely being unable to bring himself to do the Nazi salute, and then Jax getting understandably pissed about the references to Negro music. It kind of reminds me. I can't remember the fellow's name, but there was this thing I saw. It was a guy who was like a professor or historian or something, and he was the son of an African diplomat and a German nurse, and he'd actually been a kid back during the Nazi days. So yeah, imagine being half black in Nazi Germany back then. And he was talking on TV one time about what that was like, and he mentioned some Nazi back then saying, it's like, basically said to him, when we're finished with the Jews, we're going to be coming for your people. Which, yeah, the Nazis did not have a terribly high opinion of black people at all, which kind of makes the whole thing that Jesse Owens did at the 1936 Olympic Games even more awesome. But we'll put that aside for the moment. Let's see, what else? Speaking of Stein, one, I did like how they pointed out, like, yeah, of course these guys are going to think you're the leader of the team. You're an old white dude. That said, considering the way that everybody was bickering at the beginning of the episode, Stein, being one of probably the most level-headed person around, was not an unreasonable choice as leader. The problem is that Stein is an academic. Thinking on his feet is not something that comes naturally to him. He's a guy who ponders and plans and thinks things through. And the team definitely needs that. But if you want a leader, you do need somebody who can think on their feet. And ultimately, points to the team for realizing that the best person to be the leader really was Sarah. Uh, we know that she has at least some ability to pilot the ship. She is even referred to by Stein as she's a strategist. And of course, she has that League of Assassins training, and is somebody who knows how to think on her feet. And despite her impulsiveness at times, um, I have a feeling Sarah's going to work out just fine as team leader. So there's that. Let's see, what else do we have to talk about? Yeah, nothing really particular to say about Heatwave or anything else to say about Jax. You can kind of tell that Ray's sort of feeling a little bit inadequate at times because, yeah, his whole ability is gifted, wrapped up in his technology. So it wouldn't surprise me if he kind of did a little bit like what they did with Felicity back. If you sort of asked someone like Sarah or something to kind of give him a little bit of hand-to-hand training, just so that he can take care of himself a little bit more when he doesn't have the suit handy. But nonetheless, he did come up with a plan that helped them escape from the Nazis, and you can tell that that definitely did earn a little bit of Vixen's respect. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, this is, of course, the grandmother of the character that we saw on Arrow and on the animated shorts. They were originally planning to bring that actress back. She had some kind of a scheduling conflict, but they really didn't want to use Vixen, so they ultimately ended up going with her grandmother, which I think is pretty cool. The idea of Vixen as a legacy character, I think, makes perfect sense. And we'll see how things play out between the two of them. Let's see, what else? I think if there's anything I missed. Yeah, of course the question of, like, hey, where's Rip is still lingering, and of course they're going to take some time in figuring that out. And it'll be interesting to see exactly where he is, and whether or not the team is actually just going to be willing to sort of let him step back into the role of leader if and when, well, obviously when he comes back. And I have a feeling there's probably going to be a little bit of conflict there. One thing I did like, though, is that if you're looking around in the background of this episode, apparently there are quite a few Easter eggs. I only caught one, and that was it was when they were on the Wave Rider. If you looked really closely, you could briefly see the helmet worn by the Ma Hunkel version of the Red Tornado, and that just made me laugh. Ma Hunkel is a character that has Justice Society ties. In fact, I remember right, she's the grandmother of Cyclone, who is a character that I like quite a bit. And if you're not familiar with this, she was kind of what was referred to as a home front hero. They were sort of superheroes who didn't run off to Europe and Asia to fight the war. They sort of stayed in the States and tried to fight saboteurs and spies. And Ma Hunkel was basically this sort of beefy housewife from New York who would put on this ridiculous costume and a pot with some eye holes cut in on her head as a helmet and would go around New York City beating up Nazi sympathizers. It's just like the most ridiculous thing you can imagine. But again, it's just the ridiculousness of it all is one of those things that just gives it so much charm, in my opinion. And of course, Jeff Johns having written JSA and having a deep, deep fondness for those characters, I'm sure he was delighted to be able to sort of sneak that in there so that, Ma Hunkel is now technically a part of the Arrowverse. There was another helmet next to that, but I couldn't recognize what it was from. Honestly, it looked sort of like a funky version of a Stormtrooper's helmet from Star Wars, but doubtlessly that's not what it was. Although now that I think about it, I can totally imagine Ray taking the Wave Rider and going back to 1977 just for the chance to watch Star Wars in the original Star Wars in the theaters. That would be just the sort of thing that he would do. So, with that said, we're going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and please also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.